Hi everyone, my name is Masenko. I'm the coach of the Drowsy Dracozolts in the UGA League. It's a draft league and it's very cool. And this is going to be my team preview for week 5. I haven't actually uploaded any of my other matches, but I think I'm going to go back and retroactively give some team previews for some of those weeks. But yeah, but we'll just start with this one, and just because it's the most recent one, it's the most fresh in my mind. Um, and so yeah. So this is my team on the left there of the screen, and you know, I'm mostly doing this for people in my division. So you probably all already have seen this, but I think basically what I was going for with this team when drafting, I basically first picked the Zapdos because I just like the Pokemon. I think it's a strong mon. And I kind of went from there. I had the opportunity to grab a Venusaur Ninetales Sun mode, and I was like, okay, we can kind of finish that core with an Inteleon who has really good speed and utility, synergizes pretty well with the Zapdos. Um, but yeah, so ultimately I've come together with a sort of pseudo Sun mode, but mostly just tried to make a balanced team with good utility, good damage options, and the ability to just come to each week with something that is both strategically viable and potentially unique. And that's what Draft League is all about. So this week I was up against Dr. Dave and the Crymych Coalossals. Um, his team on paper looks very scary because of his crazy modes that he can bring. So he has Colossal plus Weavile. Not as good as Colossal plus Sneasel, because Weavile doesn't get inner focus and still can be faked out. But nonetheless, very scary if it can go off. Another one would be the Indeedee female plus Porygon Z. Indeedee, of course, creating a lot of space for the. Not, I mean, Porygon's not necessarily a glass cannon, but certainly isn't a tank, and just creating that space for this max strike that Porygon can do with so much damage. He has the adaptability ability, or is that what it's called? I think it's called adaptability. Basically makes his stab moves do 2 times damage instead of 1.5. Um, so yeah, he does a lot of damage. And there's a plane going over, so sorry about that. Um, yeah, and then finally another combo they have is the Frostlass Tauros. Frostlass can use Frost Breath, which is a move that will always critical hit. They can use it into their own Tauros, who has Anger Point, an ability that when they are crit, their attack raises 12 stages. Of course, you can only go to +6, but say they were -6, they would just go straight to full attack, highest possible attack that they can have. So that's a pretty scary move, and those are both pretty great mons in terms of speed tier. They're both 110. Generally speaking, if you can break 100, you're in a very good speed tier. Um, Other options they have are it seems like they get decent terrain control between the Indeedee and the Grookey. Um, they have a Fletchinder to provide Tailwind if they need it, or proc some sort of something with priority flying moves. And then they have Shellos, who of course has a very strong ability in the form of Storm Drain. And I've underestimated the Morelull several times in previous discussions and podcasts that I've been in. But Morelull has proven to be somewhat of a threat for his team. It's just a very, very difficult mon to break if you don't have the correct tools to deal with it. And as you'll see in this game, it does wall me a little bit. I did bring tools to deal with it, thankfully, because a previous match showed that it was something to consider. But yeah, so let's go into my team now. Here's what I brought this week, and these are the 6 mons. It's a little bit different than what I've usually been running. I've been generally running a more standard Sun mode between Venusaur Ninetales with Zapdos, a little bit of support in form of Klefki and Kanga, and maybe like Inteleon in the back, or generally speaking, going for something that just is well-rounded and pursuing a strategy in that regard. But this week, I'm forced to react to stuff that they are doing because their combos are potentially very oppressive, and I don't want to be caught off guard by making a wrong lead and letting them sweep with, say, Porygon or the Coalossal and not have an answer to that right out the gate. So, that said, Eject Button Switcheroo Klefki. Not a huge fan of this set in most cases, but this week it seemed very appropriate. Even though the Indeedee exists and can set Psychic Terrain, making Switcheroo unable to work since it is priority with Prankster. The leads I'm worried about are not with the Indeedee. The leads I'm worried about are with the Weavile Coalossal and the Tauros Frostlass. So if I'm faced with any of those, I'm able to just switcheroo into either Tauros or Coalossal, depending on the lead. And since they're doing self-damaging moves, they will ultimately force themselves to switch out using the eject button if that ever becomes relevant. Of course, this is something that can be predictable, so obviously I have to try to hide the eject button best I can, which can be difficult. And of course, if they bring in DD, this is not a particularly good set in terms of switcheroo. However, the eject button has other uses, which you will see in the game. I use it to great effect, mostly to reset Kangaskhan's fake out pressure. I can basically switch out Kanga and bring in the Klefki to tank a hit. The eject button will activate, and I can bring Kanga right back out in the same exact turn, but can still get another fake out in the next turn, which is very, very useful. Other moves I've brought on this Klefki, Misty Terrain is another interesting tech that I decided on bringing. I was torn between that and several other options, but ultimately I realized that I have a decent amount of priority on this team that I want to get off. And the best way to do that is to override this Psychic Terrain. And not to mention the Misty Terrain has a secondary, or I guess it's the primary thing that it does, but, in this case, it's the secondary thing other than overriding Psychic Terrain that I want to be doing with it. Mostly, they have this Morelull with Spore. They have Frostlass, who can use Will-O-Wisp against a mostly physical team I'm bringing here in the form of Kangaskhan and Machamp, and even Gallade. They have all sorts of stuff that they can be doing here that could annoy me and potentially be very disruptive. So the Misty Terrain being able to block status is very useful in that regard. And then of course Light Screen. I'm worried about Porygon and Coalossal. These guys do a lot of damage. Of course, Tauros is a threat as well, but I felt like Light Screen was probably a very good bring. Ultimately, it didn't see much use in this game. In fact, I don't think I ever actually clicked it, which is okay. I just never really got the opportunity to. But that's just how life goes sometimes. Having it there would have been good in some situations. That's kind of the beauty of Klefki is it has a decent amount of utility either way, the way I've sort of set it up. Next is this Kangaskhan Gallade combo, which I'm pretty excited about. Now this is a really weird tech, something that is a little bit unconventional, a little bit experimental. So we got the Scrappy ability, which allows me to hit ghost types. And of course, Frostlass being a ghost, I can fake it out if it's trying to set up something. But not to mention, once you get rid of that ghost type, it is an ice type, so stuff like Drain Punch is going to be super effective against it. Same with Sucker Punch. So this ability seemed pretty reasonable. And here's the thing: I was planning on maxing Kangaskhan this set, which I did twice out of the 3 games, as you'll see. The reason for that is because they don't really have a strong fighting type mon to contest him. You slap an assault vest on him and he ends up being incredibly tanky and difficult to deal with, especially since he can hit the Porygon, he can hit the Weavile, the Frostlass, the Tauros, the Coalossal, all for super effective damage with that Drain Punch and get a lot of HP back, so he becomes very, very difficult to kill because you get that extra sustain as well. He seemed like a very solid max target and also a pretty unexpected max target. You usually don't think of Kanga as being the carry mon in this situation. Now the thing is a lot of these Pokemon outspeed him, and so I've been employing. I was going to employ this Trick Room Gallade set. So what the plan was is you Trick Room. Now you can outspeed a lot of what they're potentially bringing, except for like Morelull, Mudsdale, etc. You're outspeeding all of these guys. You're outspeeding that guy, outspeeding that guy now. And then, you can just fake out or whatever you want to do with this King on that first turn. You could even bring out Clef Key, set something up, and then hopefully you get a Jack buttoned out into Kanga. And then you just start spamming Coaching into your max Kangaskhan, and he becomes an insanely difficult threat to deal with. Yeah, and for the other moves here, I bring Taunt and Knockoff. Knockoff is good for disrupting some certain mons. I know that, like, for instance, a lot of their mons are going to be running Weakness Policy. You usually see Weakness Policy on the Coalossal. You might see it on Mudsdale. Mudsdale can also be running like Assault Vest, which can be very difficult to deal with. Can knock off this Porygon's Life Orb. So there's a lot of good targets to knock off, and especially since you also get that super effective damage against like Indeedee and the Frostlass. So being able to basically pressure these support mons is another thing that's really important in this matchup. These are the enablers, right, for these other mons. And without the enablers, they're not nearly as scary. So yeah, so that's the idea behind this team, and we kind of build around that. And of course, if we're running Trick Room, and we have a lot of fighting weakness, well, Machamp seems like he's particularly strong in this matchup. Fortunately, he doesn't see any playtime based on what they bring. But in certain, if they had brought certain other sets, this Machamp would have been very, very good. I won't talk about him too much just because you didn't see him perform that much, but we like Guts here in case they do have like a Will-O-Wisp on their Frostlass. You get Bullet Punch to deal with Frostlass against Morelull, against the Weavile, all for super effective, and we like that it's priority. Since he is slow, we can use him outside of Trick Room to some degree. And then of course you just got these big damaging moves, potentially even in max form, to do a lot of damage to their team. So yeah, so he's equipping the Life Orb. We just want to be doing big damage with him in Trick Room. And then of course I'm bringing my Sun Mode. Generally a good idea to have that as a backup option. Here I've gone Weakness Policy Venusaur. I think it's been serving me well the last week. I think I brought it last week, and did I bring it the week before? I think I just brought Life Orb the week before, but last week it served me well, and I think this week it would serve me well as well, just because they do have a lot of things that can hit it for super effective, that are stabs. So you got Psychic from Indeedee, you got Fire here, you got Ice. What else? I guess like Fire. potentially. So yeah, so it seems likely that I can proc it without having to do it myself in a lot of cases. Not to mention, I did bring Stored Power Choice Scarf Ninetales if I really wanted to hit myself. So the Choice Scarf here serves two purposes. First, I can outspeed my own Venusaur in Sun to proc his weakness policy if I really have to, but more so the point of the Choice Scarf in 99% of other cases is to be able to outspeed that Weavile. So we know that Weavile has, if he's being brought alongside Coalossal, probably have a Focus Sash. So with this Choice Scarf, Ninetales usually underspeeds Weavile, but together now with this Choice Scarf, they can both just double into that Weavile turn 1. The idea is that you just Flamethrower and then Max Quake the Weavile. You get that +1 special defense, and then that Coalossal's probably going to do a Max Flare into Venusaur, assuming that that they're going for the combo, which they think they can do. You know, maybe they can tank. They think maybe I can take a hit from the Venusaur and just kill the Ninetales here. After a Surf gets off, even if it has Focus Sash, you just hit it with that Surf, and get a Max Quake off. That's super valuable. But what ends up happening is that Surf never gets off because that Weevil just gets blown up there. You get that +1 special defense boost, and then Venusaur actually survives a Max Flare in Sun pretty substantially. It doesn't even do half of his health when maxed in terms of damage. And that weakness policy then just gets procced, and it's pretty much game over from there. It doesn't matter if Ninetales goes down. You have this +2 Venusaur in Sun doing huge damage, and that Coalossal never got his speed boost. So that's kind of the idea here. And you can also lead this in a lot of other cases anyway, too. It's just a very good aggressive lead. So yeah, so that's the team. Ultimately, you'll see obviously what happens in the games, and I can do a little bit of a post commentary at the end here. So thanks for watching, guys. Enjoy the games. Hey, so we're back after the game, and we're gonna do some nice review of this matchup. So first and foremost, I just want to congratulate Dr. Dave on a well fought match. I think this was um, one of the more in depth matches I've had so far. I think he brought a team that kind of disguised what its intentions were in very conveniently. And I think he had a lot of really good plays that game. He suspected he doesn't really have a trick room in his team himself. So bringing these really slow mons against a really fast team, I feel like maybe he anticipated I had that trick room to be used, which is, if so, is very I would say like impressive, right? He clearly he does his research and he knows win conditions in a way that is a very high level of play. So his prep was insanely good. He has that Mudsdale and that Morelull, and these two are kind of the big threats that I have to worry about under Trick Room. And here's the thing: in games 1 and 2, I do set that Trick Room, right, and they prove to be very difficult to deal with. I probably could have played a lot of those games better, for sure. Anticipating that they might have those Pokemon in the back, and not setting Trick Room. But I mean, when you see a Frostlass lead, Tauros is there. You kind of gotta respect it. And I guess I was thinking once that Indeedee goes down, they can pretty safely get that Tauros out. And since my Kanga Max is almost done at that point, you know, that could be very scary for me. So I do set the Trick Room those games, and he just kind of game 1 he takes advantage of it because he gets a free Mudsdale switch into that Trick Room, and game 2 he reads it and switches into Morelull, applying immediate pressure onto that Max Kanga and eventually putting it to sleep with Spore. And I can't protect that Kanga and Taunt, so yeah, it's pretty bad, for me. That ends up losing me game 2, I think, in a lot of ways, not respecting the Morelull in the back. So yeah, that's one reason I was impressed. I think another reason would be I just thought that throughout the games he just was doing plays that were catching me off guard, making me think on my toes. And, you know, I think generally speaking, I find myself to be someone who is fairly good at reading what the opponent's going to be doing. Um, but once again, you know, I think he disguised his strategy pretty well. Um, and ultimately, you know, maybe I should have expected it. I think the Indeedee Max was quite creative. You know, I had seen his whole team at that point in the match, so I might have expected that Indeedee was kind of the only max target that he really had. And not being able to get my Venusaur in a position to kill Morelull, not being able to get my Gallade to taunt the Morelull was very, very detrimental. Same with Klefki being able to set the Misty Terrain, you know, being able to reset their Psychic Terrain over and over with the max Indeedee was very, 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 very scary. Yeah, and so that was really impressive. So I guess the other thing worth mentioning, I guess, is sort of my thought process throughout these games. I think Kanga definitely performed incredibly well. I'm very happy with the set that I brought, and it showed to be incredibly difficult to deal with as expected. Um, Being able to just drain punch things one shot, kind of boosting my attack up over and over with either those max knuckles or the coachings from the Gallade. You know, I'm able to really threaten their Mons. And I think in general, I played game 4 quite well. Once I saw the Mudsdale lead, I knew that Ninetales had to be sacked there, so that was not a blunder on my end. The only blunder I think in that turn was perhaps not flamethrowing against the Indeedee to probably pick up the kill there. But the energy ball did enough damage and was able to pick up the kill next turn anyway. So that sacrifice on the Ninetales was intentional. It allowed me to set up the Kangaskhan and the Klefki in ways that I thought were nice. I was able to Betamax Quake out into the Klefki so that I could switch into Kanga there. And at that point, I had set up the Grassy Terrain, which reduces the damage taken from ground type attacks. So yeah, so that was really nice, and as he was just boosting his special defense, I knew I was going to have to boost my special attack. So I started spamming. After the Grassy Terrain, I just did 2 max oozes and set myself up for a late game where Venusaur's Giga Drain against a Assault Vested Mudsdale would be able to sustain through any damage they could do to me. And I could cycle the Fake Out, as you saw, with Klefki eject button, stuff like that. So yeah, and what was pivotal that game was obviously making sure that the Venusaur was alive to deal with that Morelull as it came again. So sort of self-congratulatory there. I think I played those end games particularly well. Even game 2, I think, even though I was somewhat out of position when it came to that Morelull, I do think that had Kanga woken up from sleep a couple turns, I would have been primed to potentially stall out that game and get some, you know, make sure that the maybe I go to timer. Who knows? Either way, I think that was incredibly well played from Dr. Dave, and once again, thanks so much for such a fun match. So yeah, wish you best of luck in the rest of your games in this league, and yeah, thanks for watching, everyone, and subscribe if you want, I guess. So yeah, all right, bye bye.